see how might prepare all of them.
All right, so now I'm going to plug in. When I plug in, I won't be able to hear Rabbi Gassman.
Is that the Chofetz Chaim's crockpot? Looks like the Chofetz Chaim's crockpot. No?
Don't. This one was taken apart by master Talmidei Chachamim who aren't electricians.
Oh.
But I want to show you guys what's going on inside the crockpot, Bez Hashem. I'm going to be putting on my speaker now, and unfortunately, Rabbi Gassman, I won't be able to talk to you for an hour. Okay, Rabbi Isai. So now, Be'ezus Hashem, we have, as you understand, just one moment, as you understand, a big agenda, Rabbi Isai. We have to go through Kishka in the Cholent, and we have to go through the crockpot, which, like I showed Be'ezus Hashem, we will try to actually see what's really going on inside the crockpot. Most people do not have wives that are willing to let them take theirs apart. So I told my wife it was broken. And Mamela, now we know what the hell it looks like inside. And Bez Hashem, then afterward, at the end, we'll see about a bissel of the Inyonei Oyinik Shabbos, what the Ramah speaks about over here. I'm going to start from the Inyonim of HATMANA in Oichel itself. In other words, wrapping a food in a food. From there, we'll get into the sugya of Kishka, a potato kugel inside a cholent, Bez Hashem. Then we'll go to the crockpot, and then we'll go like that. It happens to be that the makor of the sugya is really primarily in Siman Reish Nun Ches, but let's build it. Now, I might have been a little bit shvach on the marmakoimis. I gave marmakoimis, and then I realized afterward, it could be that I'm going to have to open it up a little bit more, so I'll try to elaborate as I go along. I tried to keep within the marmakoimis I gave the oilam, but let's see, Bez Hashem. So there's a Gemara in Shabbos on Daf Memam and Beis. The Gemara says, Omar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi, Pam echas nichnasti, acha Rebbe lebeis hamerchatz. He went after his Rebbe, even in the mikveh, Rabbi Yisai. Ubikachti laniach leipach shel shemin bambati. This Gemara is used primarily to discuss the inyanim of cooking in a klisheni. He took some type of a jar of oil, a jug of oil, and he put it inside. So they told him, Amarlai told the klisheni v'tein. So the Gemara, Shmamina tzlas. Shmamina shemen has bishul, okay? And therefore he needed to do it in a klisheni. And then it says, Shmamina klisheni is not mevashel. And number 3, it says, Avshei Zebi Shulai. This is a sugya, which is not our sugya. But one thing we do see, he took oil inside some type of a cup, and he put that oil inside some type of a klisheni, of a nagel wasser schlissel, schlissel. He took a cup, a washing cup. He put inside hot water from the urn. The urn was a kli rishon. For all intents and purposes, I'm making the case practical. He takes an urn, he puts it inside the nagel wasser schlissel. Now he has inside the washing cup water, which is the heat of a klisheni. Legabe bishul, that's its sugya. Oil we know is mutter. Okay, there's a whole shaila about other liquids, etc. To make it a practical case, a person on a Friday night, his baby is crying, or Friday or Shabbos day, the baby's crying, Anikel's crying. He wants to take the bottle, which has in it either pasteurized milk, which was previously cooked, or mother's milk, which was not cooked. But Al Kapanim, he's putting it in a klisheni. And Lagabe, putting liquid in a klisheni, there is a makam mitzad the bishul to be mako, which is not so much our sugya. And now he wants to take it and put it inside a klisheni. Our sugya has a new shaila. What happened to HATMANA? And this is taking place on Shabbos. So even if someone's going to come along and say, well, it's the actual heat of the water is getting less and less. Because obviously, when you put hot water into a cup, it's not going to be moisif hevel, it's going to get hot, less and less hot. But al kapanim on Shabbos, there's an isser of HATMANA, even bedavar ha'eina moisif hevel. You're not allowed to wrap something, you're not allowed to wrap a food, even in a davar that's eina moisif hevel. And this Abaisai is the starting point of the sugya. Over here, comes again the Chazaynish in our Chaim Siman Lamed Zayin Sivkot Lamed Beis, and he asks a very big question. He asks over here, and this is really a halacha brought down in Siman Reish Nun Ches. He dons that over here, it sounds like that to do this idea, it's seemingly the Gemara in Shabbos, b'makom deleka bishul, it sounds like it's mutter. The Kaini b'Shulchan Aruch and Shin Yud Yud Gimel, it sounds like Mefurish and Shulchan Aruch, Shin Yud Gimel, Shin Yud Yud Gimel, mutter litain the Teichli Sheni. You're allowed to take milk for a baby, put it in a bottle, and put it inside a Kli Sheni, inside a cup. Kli Rishon might be a Shaila Bishul, but it's clear that you can put it inside a Negel Vasa cup. You can put it inside a Kli Sheni of water. How are you allowed to do that? So yes, the Kasha, the Chazon Ish, what happened to HATMANA? Says the Chazon Ish, this l'choira should be told in a machlekes Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch. This is something that gets mentioned when you learn HATMANA. The Shita of the Shulchan Aruch is HATMANA b'mixas. Even a partial HATMANA is already called HATMANA. Even a partial HATMANA. Okay, maybe it has to be that it goes up a little bit around the pot, and that's why, according to the Mechaber, you're allowed to take food and you put it on the blech. You're allowed to return it to a blech. Or you're allowed to put it on the blech on Erev Shabbos, because that's not HATMANA. There has to be a partial HATMANA, a partial covering, a partial something. But HATMANA b'mixas, even a partial being matmin, even a partial placement inside a dover that's moisef hevel is going to be a problem, according to the Shulchan Aruch. Rama holds not like that. Rama holds that if you take something, there's no isser of HATMANA unless it's kulay mutman, unless it's totally covered. Machlekes says the Chazon Ish, this Gemara l'chayra is a raya to the Ramah. This Gemara says that Rebbe was willing to take a baby bottle and put it inside a Negel Wasser cup with boiling hot water. Says the Chazon Ish, how could you learn the case? So the Chazon Ish, you have to say it's sticking out a little bit, which is really what we do. We take the baby bottle, we put it inside the Negel Wasser cup with a klisheni, and the baby gets his water after a while. And that's how it goes. And l'chayra, that's HATMANA b'mixas. It's a partial HATMANA because the bottle is partially covered and surrounded by the hot water, and that's called HATMANA b'mixas. Says the Chazon Ish, this Gemara is a raya to the Ramah, that the Ramah says HATMANA b'mixas. If you're partially covered, it's not called HATMANA. Person has a chicken soup, the hot plate goes off, and he partially covers it. That's not called HATMANA. Same thing. You take a baby bottle, you put it inside boiling hot water in a klisheni. That's not called. That's halacha l'maisa. There's a halacha l'maisa. Mishabur brings his case in Reish Nun Ches that you're allowed to take a baby bottle, just don't submerge it totally. If you submerge it totally, so then it's HATMANA b'dover, even if it's an Eina Moisef Hevel. But if it's on Shabbos, it's aser because you're fully mutman. If you're fully mutman, then you have a problem. You have a problem. HATMANA b'dover, even b'dover Eina Moisef Hevel. But says the Chazon Ish, that's all good according to the Ramah, that HATMANA b'mixas is loishme HATMANA. But in fact, the Chazon Ish, according to the Shulchan Aruch, that HATMANA b'mixas is a problem. So then how am I allowed to take a baby bottle, which is mefurish in the Gemara and Shabbos Daf Mem, and submerge it even partially? Bishlama, the way you can learn the Gemara according to the Ramah is that you submerged it partially, because HATMANA b'mixas is not HATMANA. But according to Shulchan Aruch, that even HATMANA b'mixas is called HATMANA. So here it's submerged partially. There's a little bit surrounding the bottle. You know how it is. You let the bottle sit in there, and it's already, covering most of the milk and whatever. So therefore, that's HATMANA b'mixas. Says the Chazon Ish, this is a raya to the man d'amar HATMANA b'mixas is loishme HATMANA. Over here comes along the Chazon Ish in our Chaim Siman Lamed Zayin Sivkot Lamed Beis with an unbelievable chiddush, which is earth-changing, earth-shattering, Rabbi said, earth-shattering, changing. He says, Sarch loimar, near the Ratzaloimar lahachnis apach toichan bati v'avagav dezu HATMANA. So he says in Chayr it's also to be matmin. So he says like this. He says mikol makayin bechamin shebekli mutar lahatmin at tzaynin. What's the pshat? Muchach te'ein nesina bechamim bichlal HATMANA. The Chazon Ish is mechadesh a yisod here that there's no HATMANA of a food inside another food. What are we talking about? Till now, we were talking about, in all the sugyas, salt and remets and gechalim and all types of matmin agents. But now we're talking about, says the Chazon Ish, that you're taking a bottle and you're wrapping it in water. Water itself is a food. Says the Chazon Ish, HATMANA of a food in a food is not called HATMANA. That's the shita, because you have to remember By the Chazon Ish, this was very serious because the Chazon Ish held like the Shulchan Aruch that HATMANA b'mixas is HATMANA. So he didn't have to just answer up for the Shulchan Aruch. He had to answer up Pashut for himself. That how is it that you're allowed to take a baby bottle, which is referred in the Gemara, and submerge it even partially inside? According to the Chazon Ish, you can learn the Gemara differently. According to Chazon Ish, it comes out of kula. Till now, we were saying you're only going to be allowed to submerge the bottle partially. Because the lumdus of why you were not allowed to submerge it is because it'll be HATMANA. So he said, so if you do HATMANA b'mixas, it's mutter. The Chazon Ish holds HATMANA b'mixas is aser. So he's going to have to learn that no, it must be there's something special about being matmin food inside another food, but that's not called HATMANA. Therefore, it comes out according to the Chazon Ish kula, that since we're talking about that you're submerging the baby bottle in hot water, so then that's food in a food. So then you can submerge it legamre because there's no HATMANA b'chlal on a food. This is the shita of the Chazon Ish. Now, I must tell you, there's other Gemaras. There's a Gemara in Shabbos on Kuf Mem Ham Beis. It says that you're allowed to take a chicken, a cold chicken that's dry, and put it inside a kli rishon on Shabbos, as long as it was once previously cooked. So if you hear the Chazon Ish says, hey, wait a minute, what happened to HATMANA? He was over there trying to make this chicken hot. What happened to HATMANA? Chazon Ish says, according to my Yisai, there's no problem. Because it's food and food, there's no problem of HATMANA. No problem of HATMANA. And the Evan Yisrael, in Chelik Chesim, in Yud Ches, he says, no, this is not a raya to the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish until now is talking about a case of where you have a kli and you're submerging a kli that has food in it, let's say a baby bottle, and you're submerging that in food. Says the Rav Yisrael Yanke Fisher, you don't have a raya from the case of the chicken in the soup. If you take the chicken and put it in the soup, that's mamish oichel and oichel. That doesn't have a tsuras HATMANA. The tsura of HATMANA is when you're taking a kli with food and you're surrounding it with something. Says Rav Yisrael Yanke Fisher, who cares if when you're surrounding it with a remetz or a salt, how a salt is also food, or you're surrounding it with a cholent, or you're surrounding it with boiling hot water, as long as it's a kli. When you have a kli with food inside the kli, and now you put that into a food, that could also be HATMANA. The Gemara says that they took chicken and they submerged that chicken inside chicken soup, into boiling hot chicken soup, cold chicken into chicken soup. That's mamish oichel noichel. When it's oichel noichel, it becomes one. It becomes one thing. It becomes one thing. That's about the not called the tzuras HATMANA. Halacha l'maisa on this Shailer Aboisai, the Taz, the Prima Godim, the Tiferes Yisrael, the Chai Adam, the Aruch HaShulchan and Tzivkat and Gimel, the Mishnah Berurah. And Simon Rachel and Chesiv cut in base says, Kosvav Achreinim, Aser Likach Kli. You're not allowed to take a baby bottle with milk. Ubetoichlei mashket sainin, a baby bottle with milk, and put it into a negel vaser shlisel on Shabbos, mole chumim, that you should heat it up. Afilu, if it won't come me, they lad saledis by. This has nothing to do with bishul. The ed's in fact that you're warming it up. Shezed derech HATMANA kevin shekuloi tamim b'saycha. Obviously, the Mishnah Berurah is saying if you submerge it partially, then it's only going to be HATMANA b'mixes, and that'll be mutter. But the etz, in fact, that you're submerging it in a food, that is not a heter. So according to the Mishnah Berurah, how are you going to take a baby bottle on Shabbos and submerge it? You're going to do it halfway and let it get heated up. Mashein Kain, according to the Chazon Ish, and this is really a graz also in Shin Yoches Sif Chav Gimel, the Chazon Ish holds that there's no gzeira of submerging food in food, because otherwise he's going to get stuck with the sugya of HATMANA b'mixes, which he holds is shmei HATMANA. So how are you allowed to put a baby bottle? In other words, if you learn like the Shulchan Aruch, then you're forced to learn that HATMANA b'mixes is shmei HATMANA. So you're forced to learn that case of the Gemara, when you took the baby bottle and put it inside the water, is permitted. Why? Because hagam HATMANA b'mixes is shmei HATMANA, but this is not HATMANA. It's only HATMANA when you're putting it in a matman agent, but not when you're doing HATMANA inside a food. There's no HATMANA, one food inside another food. Lo mevai if you put it straight in the food, even if it's in a kli. Oh, and this Rabbi says, it's an amazing thing. He also got stuck with the Shiloh. So he also answered the same way. The Sfardim hold that HATMANA b'mixas is shmei HATMANA. So Mela, how's he going to learn the Gemara? How's the Shulchan Aruch going to learn the Gemara? They must learn the Gemara is talking about that you're submerging it even fully, but in a food. And there's no HATMANA, food in a food. The Mishnah Berurah, because he's Mekel on the Shiloh of HATMANA b'mixas is not HATMANA. So Mela, he can learn the Gemara is talking HATMANA b'mixas, so you don't have a makor anymore to say that when you submerge a food in a food that there's no HATMANA. So it'll come out a kula in the Chazon Ish. Very interesting. That okay, that's that. Now it happens to be Rabbi Isai in a baby bottle. It could be there's another makom to be makel because the Shartzin and Sivkot in Yud Zayin says that if you're doing it just lahafek tzina, you're not doing it to heat up the baby bottle. I think most people are not doing it to heat up the baby bottle. They're doing it simply to remove the cold from the baby bottle. So therefore, anyways, it will be mutter, and it will probably be mutter even to submerge it fully. So come out, you have two reasons to submerge a baby bottle fully. If you're doing it just to get rid of the heat, the cold. And number two, according to Chazon Ish, it's anyways mutter because it's a food in a food. Is a Baisai, their shaila of HATMANA oichel inside another oichel is one of the major shailas that we have to dan. What's the halacha? He wants to have kishka. So he wants to take the kishka, he wants to wrap it in the silver foil. I don't know. They say silver foil causes Alzheimer's. So sakana chamira may isura. So I don't know. He wraps the kishka maybe in baking paper. I don't know. I'm not a kishkologist. I don't know. But Al Kapanim, he wraps his kishka or his potato kiggle inside something else. If he takes the potato kugel and puts it straight into the cholent and he submerges it in the cholent, there can't be any shiloh. That we know is a mefurish Gemara, that a food and a food, even though you want the kugel somewhat separate, but it doesn't matter. A food and a food becomes one big cholent. But what the people do is they take the kishka, they wrap the kishka in silver foil, and now they put it inside the cholent. Ma'adinoi, is that a problem of HATMANA? So now you understand, by side, that the starting point of this shaila is going to be that according to the Chazon Ish, der ganze shaila fight sich nicht an. Because according to Rabbeinu Agadol, the Chazon Ish, there's no problem of doing HATMANA oichel within oichel. As I've said, there's no problem. There's no problem. And according to the Chazon Ish, there's no question you could take the kishka and you could put it into the cholent, even though you're not going to make holes in the kishka, etc. You could put it straight inside the cholent on Erev Shabbos, and we'll see in a minute. Even if, we'll see in a minute, a case of maybe even on Shabbos. And this, Rabbi Isai, is, as you realize, the kula that comes out of the Chazon Ish. But already, Rabbi Isai, this shaila was discussed way, way back already in the Aruch HaShulchan and Sivkat and Gimel. Yesh nashim shaloichais hakli shakigel b'soichai. They take the kli that the kigel, or he writes kugel. Sorry, Litvisha. He take the kugel is inside this kli, and he takes that. It's not a new religion, Rabbi Yisai. Their cholent, their kigels as an alta zach, and nishkanaya zach, Rabbi Yisai. As the cholent, the kigel, they put it inside the cholent, and it would get surrounded by the cholent. There's HATMANA Gemura. He said that's HATMANA Gemura, but Davar Ma'aseh Hevel. Kevin Shekaderi, but Teichatarna Shemale Gechalim. He says, what do you mean? The cholent is on the fire. The fire is the cholent is a davar moisif hevel, and you're putting it into something that's moisif hevel. V'aser afilu mi b'idyoyin. It's not a new shaila. The Paiskim Madaning, the shaila is not a new shaila. The Chazon Ish would hold there is no shaila because in food there's no such thing as HATMANA. HATMANA has to have a certain surah that you're being matmin in some type of a matmin agent. Food is not a matmin agent, so therefore cholent is not a matmin agent. Gamarnu. But you see already the Aruch HaShulchan. And you see already, I mentioned before, all the Paiskim, they learned there is HATMANA oichel inside another oichel. If there's a hefsek kli, so the mela comes again to Aruch HaShulchan, and talk to Aruch HaShulchan, you're not allowed to be matmin in a kli, in a kugel inside a cholent, even on Erev Shabbos. Afidim by Jarmim Loishin, he brings down maybe this is Aitik Svara. And this Rabbi Yisai is the Psak of the Minchas Yitzvak and Chelik Ches Yud Zayin, and many others. In the Maisa, we know there's a ganze minig oilam that does wrap cholent, kishka, potato kugel, and puts it in the cholent. But again, I want to stress the shaila is, Rabbi Yisai, we're not dining beside the silver foil. We're dining that here is a person that takes kishka, he takes kugel, and he puts it into the cholent. And when he's putting it into, so we'll see. The way that I'm looking at this picture over here is he put it, not submerged in cholent. He puts it on top. Now this, what I'm seeing over here, bivada is not a problem. According to the Chazon Ish, it's not a problem because it's food, which is the matmin agent, and food can never be the matmin agent. But even according to the Mishnah Berurah, Rabbi Yisai, It's only if it's HATMANA fully. But this picture over here is bevadai not a problem, because the picture over here is showing a picture of a kishka, which is on top of the cholent. It's only HATMANA, the mixus. So that, Rabbi Isai, is not a shaila. And now that you know the lamdis, you'll see that Mamanashach, that's for sure mutter. But what the Aruch HaShulchan was talking about was where the kishka was submerged totally inside the cholent. What's the din of submerging totally inside the cholent? So like you're hearing, the Aruch HaShulchan says it's aser, and the Hilchos Yitzchak said it's aser. And this is brought that there's Yisrael Yanke Fisher, the Morah Shabbos, in the 544th page. He asked him, they used to put it in some type of plastic, a cholent-friendly bag inside the cholent, and you said it's like eggs. They asked, the Morah Shabbos wanted to say just like an egg. You could take an egg and put it inside the cholent. So he said, that's not doima, because Beitzim, he says, what's the shaykhis? That's a food mamish. The Masha'en Kain over here, this is considered a hefsek kli, which protects your food and blocks it. So you're using the cholent and not allowing the cholent to become one with the kishka. Masha'en, if you take an egg and put it in the kishka, that wouldn't bother us as much, because that becomes one with the cholent. Okay, you could down on the svaras and whatnot, but Al Kapanim, it says over here that you l'chayra have a problem. The Aruch HaShulchan says of taking a potato kugel and putting it straight in the cholent. Tell it to me. You see that the Heintig Achreinim, we'll see in a minute, they down it. Might say the Aruch HaShulchan already answers. Aruch HaShulchan already bad to Aruch HaShulchan brings down, maybe there's a rush, that would be mekel. So this is the shaila. Now, everybody's like, what are the svaras to be mekel that there could be a minig oilam? Now, you understand, if a person were to, like I said, put it on top, so then it's not mutmin totally, then there's no shaila. But let's say it's mutmin totally. So now, let's say he puts holes inside the kishka, inside the silver foil and whatnot. He put holes all around. Because what's the lumdis really be'etzim why he wants the kishka in the cholent? If you ask him, why do you want the kishka in the cholent? He'll tell you, I want the kishka in the cholent because I want the taste of the cholent in the kishka. And I want the taste of the cholent in the potato kugel. So Bezai, what is that? If you ask him, so why are you wrapping it in the cholent? Are you doing it to get it hot? He says, what shaykh is hot? The heat is coming from the fire underneath. I'm not interested in the heat. He says, I'm interested in the taste. So we learned last week that the Shulchan Aruch and Base says that if you're doing something for an andere kavana, if you're doing it not for the kavana of HATMANA, you're doing it for the kavana of that it shouldn't dry out, we said, you're doing it for the kavana, in our case, of the taste. You know why I'm wrapping it in cholent? Because I want the taste of the cholent. So Bezai, in such a case, we could be mekel. The problem is that the case we're talking about is that he didn't go and put the holes in. So if he didn't put the holes in, so then you could ask, why is he doing it? Now the truth is, if you ask this fellow, why are you doing it if you didn't put the holes in? So I think we know the secret. The secret is even if you don't put the holes in, but somehow the taste of the cholent gain into the kishka, into the potato kugel, and it does get the taste. So kipshutai, and this is be'emis what the guy in Mishal Mezamin and Shmir Shabbos in Perak Aleph in HaRav Dalit says. He says, listen, the Maisa, the reason you're doing it is that be'etzim, you really want the kishka to be one with the cholent. You just don't want it to fall apart and breckle all over the place. But beside, you really want that the cholent taste should get into the kishka or into the potato kugel. So beside, that's called ein kavanasai latmana. And beside, that would be mutter. The only thing I have what's bothering me is, so what are you going to do with Aruch HaShulchan? What are you going to do with Aruch HaShulchan? Now, but I don't know if it's fair. The Aruch HaShulchan have nishkahat silver foil, Rabbi said. So I don't know. In the Aruch HaShulchan, they used to take, the lashon of the Aruch HaShulchan is, they took a little kli with a potato kugel and they put that kli into the cholent. It's a whole different shmooze, Rabbi said. I don't know what they were doing. Maybe they were doing it to keep it hot. Right? I guess it kept it even hotter. I don't know. They had no way of doing this. Maybe they didn't have enough fire, so they wanted to put it inside the cholent. Maybe they were doing it for the heat. Mashenkin, in our case, why in the world is he doing that? Why doesn't he just put it on top of the hot plate? If he's putting it on the cholent, it must be that the reason why he's doing it is because he wants to taste. In our case, we have a hot plate. Why not? What's the nafkamina? Nafkamina is a ma'aseh shahaya last Shabbos. Last Shabbos, somebody in shul came over to me. I was davening in a later minyan. I was obviously giving chizik to the oilam that davened later. And somebody had davened in an earlier minyan, and he came to me right before I started Kriyas HaTorah. And he told me that he had the power out, and the hot plate is off. Okay? So he told me that it's fine. The cholent is still hot. That's not his shayla. The cholent is still hot. He said what he always does is he takes always the kishka, the potato kugel, excuse me. He takes the potato kugel out of the fridge, right, which is dry and fully cooked, and he takes it and he puts it on an upside down bekel on Shabbos day, which we explained is mutter mitzad chazara and nesina l'chatchil. It's not a problem because he's doing it in such a fashion. He asked me, can I take that potato kugel and put it inside the cholent on Shabbos? Kloimar, the cholent is no longer on the fire because the fire went off. The cholent is still boiling hot. So he wants to figure out a way to cook up his cholent. So he asked me, can I take the potato kugel and submerge it in the cholent on Shabbos? Gewaldik, Rabbi say. So now we have mamach and nafkamina. According to the Mishnah Berurah, this is Isser Gomer, because now he's not doing it for the taste. He's doing it because he wants to heat up the potato kugel. So if he did it on HaRav Shabbos, he's doing it for the taste. It's mutter. But over here on Shabbos, why is he doing it? He's doing it in order that it should get hot. That's exactly what he's trying to do. So to submerge it in the cholent is going to be an Isser Gomer. According to the Chazon Ish, there is no din of HATMANA in food. Food is not a matmin agent. The only thing that are matmin agents are gefes and zefes and sulfur and bulfur and yolfur, all those achin. But machenkein cholent is food, and food is not a matmin agent. So I told him, look, Manashach is something you for sure can do. You could take that potato kugel and you could submerge it halfway. So then the Manashach it's mutter. According to the Mishnah Berurah, it's mutter because it's HATMANA b'mixas. According to the Chazon Ish, it's going to be mutter because it's going to be Oichel. Oichel is going to be mutter. So that's what I told him to do. Put it in, submerge it the way you saw that picture before, and then the Manashach it's going to be mutter. This Abayisai is part one, and it's hard for me to hear. If the other wants to ask me questions, I'll take out the mic for a minute. Take it out. I should be able to hear in a minute. I hear. No, I don't hear. No, I don't hear. I don't hear it, so I'm going to put it back. I'm sorry. At the end, I'll have to do it.
Questions on the chat.
Oh, wait, now I hear. Right on the chat, right on the chat. Let's go weiter. Okay, I was asked. Okay, let's go Bez Hashem. Let's go into the Shaila Crackpot. This Rabbi say was maybe of the biggest Shilas that in the last 30 years. When you think of the big Shilas, certainly the Crackpot was a big Shilah. We learned Rabbi say that HATMANA b'davar hamoisif hevel is usher even on Erev Shabbos. That means you're not allowed to take something and wrap it in a matmin agent, which increases heat, whether it's remetz or not, whether it's something I could stoke or not, because if you wrap something in a material, which is Moisef Chaim, then you'll come to wrap it in remetz, which is Moisef Chaim. And if you come to wrap it in remetz, which is Moisef Chaim, then it'll be geferlich, you'll come to stoke. So therefore, you're not allowed to wrap something in a davar Moisef heaven. We explained that rarely in our society do we have such things. We don't deal with soifa, gopher, wolfer, all these things we don't deal with. And therefore, it's very rare that we should have anything. We tried to find a case. We found somewhat of a case that you can't take a hot plate and put the pot on the hot plate and wrap the pot, the gamre. Perhaps somebody was asking me, he has an urn that he has like a jacket that he puts on the urn. And he asked me that would be a problem, because it is a fire underneath, and on top is a davar she'eina moisev hevel, and therefore the davar that's eina moisev hevel becomes, like we explained last time in Reish and Zayin Sif Ches, becomes a moisev hevel because the heat goes up into this urn jacket, like we said, the heat goes up into the actual towel, and turns it into one big matman agent. But on his case of the urn, I was makel, because he told me the reason why he puts that jacket on is he says he doesn't care about the heat. The urn gets as hot as he wants the water to get. So he told me the reason why he puts the jacket on the urn is partially because the outside of the urn is hot. He has little kids around. He doesn't want them touching it. He himself doesn't want to touch it. So therefore, that's not called kavana to be moisev hevel. If anything, he's trying to do kavana not to be moisev hevel. He's trying to make it that, it shouldn't be hot, at least for the outside. Okay. So Kopanim, that was the cases in our society that we have of HATMANA v'davar moisev hevel. Okay. L'maisa, the shaila is about a crockpot. A crockpot is a unique thing. You have usually a hot plate, which, the bottom is hot. Okay, that's not HATMANA at all, because there's absolutely no part of the pot that goes on your hot plate, which is being covered by a heat element. Only the bottom is cold. That's not called HATMANA b'mixas. HATMANA has to have some level of covering. HATMANA means that it's somewhat submerged. It has to be somewhat of a submerging, a little bit, something. It has to be somewhat HATMANA, but if it's not at all, so then it's not HATMANA. But a crock pot, l'chayra, is HATMANA because it's fully, everyone knows you have the pot and you have around it the heat element, and the heat element is hot all around. And therefore, if you have a heat element all around and your pot is fully submerged, your pot with hot food is fully submerged inside a hot heat element, so then l'chayra, such a thing is HATMANA. Now, before I even begin, Rabbi Yisai, l'chayra, for the Svardim, this is mamash the emes halacha. A Svardish Jew, I don't know, maybe we'll see if there's any kulas, but kipshutai, a Svardish Jew is not, and a Jew in Bnei Brak, the Chazon Ish, that we just said they paskin HATMANA b'mixes is yes called HATMANA. A Svardish Jew l'chayra has a problem of HATMANA. He has a problem with that crockpot. It's Erev Shabbos, even Erev Shabbos it's also. It's submerged. We'll see, maybe the lid is not submerged, but it's certainly HATMANA b'mixas. It's submerged inside. This is the heating element, and the pot goes in here, and it certainly surrounds the actual pot. L'chayra. It's not so pashut. We'll see in a minute. But for the Sephardic Yid, this is a very serious shayla. We'll see in a minute. Maybe there's a limit chos. But the shayla is, what about for an Ashkenazi Yid? Can an Ashkenazi Yid use a crock pot on even Erev Shabbos? On Shabbos itself, obviously, if you want to return it, there has to be a proper blech in there. We explained this. And obviously, you can only do chazara when it's fully cooked and with all its tzayim and whatnot. But we want to know on Erev Shabbos, and we're not daning mitzat shia, let's say it's fully cooked or whatever the case is, we're makel din anyways on Michael Ben say, okay. So now Erev Shabbos, he wants, could I just use a crack pot? I'm not going to touch a cholent until tomorrow. So what's the halacha l'chayra over here? It seems to be fully submerged. So we have to first dan l'chayra that the lid is not covered. All the cases of HATMANA, of koil HATMANA that we done till now, seemingly was submerged legamre, including the top. They used to take pots, wrap it legamre in a blanket and whatnot, and that's real HATMANA. That's fully covered. The shaila is, what if you have like what we have over here, a crack pot, that it's fully submerged, but the lid is not? That means there's four sides, we'll say, covered, kilo, and the fifth side, the top side, is not covered. How do you don that? The bottom is covered, the sides are all covered, but the top is not covered. Do we say that's already called HATMANA legamre? Or do we say, no, it's still called HATMANA b'mixas? It's not called legamre mutman. This is a baisai. Let me read you from the Lashonis of the, let's read from the Ramah. Let's see. So it's like this. Actually, before I read you from let's read it like this. We'll go right to the point because I don't want to run out of time over here. There's a lashon in the Ramah. The Ramah says that if it's megula lemala, If it's opened on top, it's not HATMANA. Those are the words in the Ramah. Yesh Lakor in the Ramah. Ramah says once it's open on top, then it's not a problem of HATMANA. What is the top that the Ramah is talking about? There's two possibilities. The Ramah could be talking about the top, the lid. If the lid is open, not that the lid is on, but if it's not covered, then it's not called HATMANA, and then that would be a kula. It's not called HATMANA until every part is covered. Or does he mean that it's megula lamala? He means lamala on the walls. In other words, doesn't mean that the HATMANA goes up until here, but it's megula lamala, it's open on top of the walls. Or does it mean, no, the whole wall is covered? Megula lamala means that the lid is not covered. So you should know, Rabbi Isai, the Prima Gadim in Reish and Gimel, in Eshel Avram, Yedzayin says, Eina chanami, kol shemegula lemala pia v'kisui levad. The mouth, the kisui levad, that's the only part that's uncovered, is still av shekula tmuna mutter, l'deyazu. According to the Ramah, mutter. And this is Mefersh the Chayadam, like Nikra HATMANA, Elikashenegah Davar, Biguf Aktera, Milemala, Ulemata, Ubekolat Stadim. It's not called HATMANA unless you're fully covered. Unless you're fully covered. This is the sheet of the Aruch HaShulchan. Reish Nun Gimel Siv Katan Chav Daled. Udvar V'loi Mikra HATMANA. The Davka Kishikois LeHatana Medubakim. It's connected. Saviv. Ayakter Machazin Gam LeMala. V'zelo Shayach B'Madas Kteris B'Tanurim. Gam lemala, the Mishabura definitely sounds like that in Reish and Gimel Sivkat in Memches, in Sivkat in Samachtes. Ramosha, in Chelik Dalit, Igros Moshe, Simonayim Dalit, HATMANA is Dalit. They asked him, Hey, Rashim and Eider, Hayim Lo'olam Kishemashu Minaktera Einam Mechus. If there's any part that's open, Lo Yechashiv Tamin, it won't be called Tamin. Tshuva. HATMANA Mikri Kishuv Mechusa Limala Uminat Stadim. He doesn't mean Limala in the Stadim. He's saying Minat Stadim and Lamali is obviously referring to the lid. He says, Mistaber, that if the Mug and Pani is like, a little tiny thing or whatever, okay. But Avada, it seems to be that this is definitely the pashtus of all the paiskim, and therefore the shaila is over. The it should come out that a crackman is mutter because the lid is obviously not covered. So if about the lid is not covered, so then therefore we, the Ashkenazim, hold HATMANA, the mixas, is loish HATMANA, and what's called HATMANA b'mixas, any part that's open, even the lid, even if the lid is not covered, that's already called HATMANA b'mixas. It's only covered on the sides and the bottom, but it's not covered on the top. And this is why, Rabbi Yisai, you should know that it's Yadua, that they say, Reb Moshe, the Dibarta Bam, in Chelik Aleph, David Feinstein, Zechat Tzadik Levrache, in Simon Samachei, in Oisdalad, he says his father says there's no chash. Once you go with the Ramah, that's the pshitis. Anytime it's open at all, it's mutter, and therefore a crackpot doesn't have a problem. You avada have to worry about Shia and Chazara, but not HATMANA. And this Rabbi Yisai is the psak of the Shevet Levi in Chelik Tes, in Siman and Beis. He says it's very difficult. Kasha Litcha is the Ramah, and all the paiskim that go with the Ramah, and the way they learned the Ramah. So therefore, this is certainly the pashtus. This is certainly the pashtus. And I would say that, from this point on, somebody who wants to know, am I allowed to use a crackpot on Shabbos, meaning on Erev Shabbos? The answer is yes. And if somebody wants to know, why would you have to lift it up? It wouldn't be al HATMANA. You have to lift it up a little bit, like I mentioned once, because otherwise the blech that you're going to make, you're going to put silver foil on the sides and silver foil on the bottom. It's not going to be any colder. The purpose of the blech is to make the heat cold, less intense. But at Kamet, you put in silver foil, which is a conductor, and you don't raise it up a little bit, all it's going to do is increase the heat. So that's why I mentioned you should lift it up a little bit, and then the air can come in, and then you put silver foil on the sides and silver foil on the bottom. This is Adkan, the Psak HaPashit. The Maisa, over 30 years ago, the Gaon Shlomo Zalman discussed the crackpot, and the Minchas Shlomi discusses it a bit, in Chelik Beis, in Siman Lamed Daled, in Nois Hey. And it seems to be that he was clearly bothered by the crackpot. Now, there's lots of different conflicting shmuas about Rosh Shlomo Zalman at the end of his life. This was a big nidin right before Shlomo Zalman was nifter. And maybe some say that the Rosh Shlomo Zalman was potentially are going to be chayzer. But what was the nidayin b'chlal of Rosh Hashanah? There was borrowed that there's a shmua, a kala de like pasik, that Rosh Hashanah wanted to be machmir on the crackpot. The way we explain, it's very difficult to be machmir. You're going to say Rosh Hashanah was machmir because he learned that megula lemala means that it has to be open on the sides of the wall. That's neged the graz, it's neged the prima godim, it's neged the archashulchan, it's neged the mishabura, it's neged the pashib shatan the ramah, it's neged ramosh, it's neged everybody. Hard to believe that that's the reason why one would come to be machmir in a crackpot. Elamai, Rosh Hashanah was worried about HATMANA b'mixas. He's going against the Ramah and all the Ashkenazi paiskim. Also not so mistaber. Not so mistaber. Elamai, they bring a Rabbeinu Tam. I saw the Orcha Shabbos. He brings a Rabbeinu Tam and Sefer Yasher that HATMANA is mashma mechusa ba rubayai kulai. They bring a Rabbeinu Tam that says rubayai kulai. It has to be mutman rubai. So it sounds like roiv is enough, but again, everybody say that Rabbeinu Tam is against the Pashup Shan Ramah. It's against all the Paiskim, how they learned the Ramah, and therefore it's very hard to believe that that's the reason why Rosh Hashanah was machmer. The nusach that I heard from one of the Talmidim of Rosh Hashanah was what was bothering Rosh Hashanah was that the way they make the crackpot is they put as much potential heat all around it as possible. And they would not be able to put the heat on top simply because if they would put the heat on top, the whole thing would explode. And as you can't have a matziv, there would be too much heat all concentrated inside. So therefore, the reason why they're not being matm in the top, the reason they're not being matm in the top is because it would burn the food, kivyachol. But they're trying as much as they can to do something to increase the heat in all stadim without it getting ruined. In other words, normally when you were taking something and putting it in the remets, you were able to put it all around. But by a crockpot, since there is no option, but you're being matmin it, kulai, to whatever extent that kulai would enable it to cook and to be good. And therefore, that's not a stira. The only time that we say you have to do the entire thing is when, if you're not doing the entire thing, you're showing us that I'm not as interested and I'm not so nervous. But then therefore, once you did something by leaving it open, you show us you're not so nervous. But if they made an apparatus that the full tachlis of this apparatus is to get as much heat all around as you could, we just can't do the top. So then that shows us that you're obviously yes-sehitzt about the heat. That's a nusach that they say. That's a nusach that they say. And that's what they say. L'maiser Abaisai, I must tell you that this is somewhat of a pella. First of all, I know somebody who actually wants more heat in their crockpot, and they take silver foil and they put it on the top. Now, that's for sure going to be a major problem. That's for sure usher. I'm just showing you that it's not so simple. It's not so simple that a person would not want more heat in his crockpot. That's for sure usher, because now he's making it that it's mutman in ganzen. Okay, number one. Number two, before we even begin, you have to know that b'di eved, there is no question it's mutter, because there are shitas that hold that what we're describing is bevadei mutter. For example, a person that does it is being saimach on the paiskim and say it's mutter. So therefore, he's considered a noimer mutter. Number one. Number two, there are shitas, the Ramah brings down a ration in Zayin Sif Aleph, that if you do HATMANA for tomorrow, it's mutter. We don't pass it like this, lechatchila. But certainly in our case, by chalent, a lot of times he's doing it for tomorrow. Another thing is there are many paiskim that Ramah brings down in Rishon and Zayin, in Sif Zayin, that if you're doing it on a food that's already Michael Ben Drusai, we mentioned that we're machmir, even when it's fully cooked on HATMANA. But there are sheets not like that. So there's no shaila b'diavad, it's mutter. That's not even a shaila. The only thing is, Rabbi Isai, is that Rosh Hashanah's taina, it's a chiddush. It's a chiddush. Rosh Hashanah says that the only reason why they're not fully covering it is because fakert, they wouldn't be able to. But therefore, that still has the shem HATMANA. It's a chiddush, because you could have heard the Chazal were geyser only if you're not minute fully. It's a chiddush. Void, l'maisa. It's a little bit hard to understand that on the lumdus of a crackpot. The crackpot is called a slow cooker. I once heard from Sheinberg Zecher Tzadik Levracha, he said that a crackpot is mutter. I asked him why. He told me, a slow cooker. They call it a slow cooker. Slow cooker means the exact opposite. You're showing us that you're not so sehitz. So you can't say, he said Rav Sheinberg, that the fact that it's not covered on top is adarabba, you would really want more and more heat. Adarabba, you want less and less heat. You want something to have a slow cooker. It's a chiddush. I must tell you, Rabbi Isai, when I took apart the crock pot, I started losing my cheshik for the chumrah, and I wonder if the metzias that Rosh Zalman was shown and was told is either different today, number one, or even if it's not different today, but maybe he wasn't shown this metzias. This Rabbi Isai is what the crock pot used to look like. This is the inside. This part over here, I took off. This was around it. I'll show you. I don't want to hurt myself, but this part over here is the heating element which goes around. As you'll see, this piece is just metal. This piece over here is just metal. The heating element is just this piece over here, which goes around. A little, small, tiny piece. The reason, obviously, it gets so hot is because since you're dealing with a metal inside, so then it conducts the heat very, very well. But if I ask you, where is the actual heating element? It's concentrated in this one little area around. That means, Rabbi Isai, when you go into a crock pot, it's not exactly what people think. It's not the pshat that the entire outside is one big boiling hot of remets. It's a very different story. Still could be a problem for the Sephardim. But it seems to be that it only surrounds it in one minor area, which means that this entire part is hot simply because it's a metal which is a conductor. But I'm not sure if one can consider this to be that you were matmin it in remets anymore. I don't know if this is considered any more remets. I don't know if this is I don't know if this is what Rosh Zalman was dining on. And as a matter of fact, I'm not sure exactly why. In the Sefer Orchos Shabbos, he seems to be very bothered about a crock pot. He writes himself in Perek Beis Arakuf Memtes, "Im gufei chimam nimtzaim rak betachtis asir." If the guf chimam would be on the bottom of it and not on the sides, oishem nimtzadim on the tzadei asir v'loy betachtis, or if they're only on the sides and not on the bottom, then yesh lahakol. Okay, so what if you have a situation like I'm describing, that it's only on the sides, but it's only on half of the sides? So then it could be that even Rosh Zalman would be making on a crock pot, Rabbi Isai. And therefore, if someone's going to ask me, can an Ashkenazi be makel in a crock pot? It seems to me that certainly an Ashkenazi could be makel in a crock pot. Number one, it's probably called HATMANA b'mixas. Number two, even if it's not called HATMANA b'mixas, because of that svara. But today, the way it's made, at least this is the one that I took apart. I don't know what you have in America, but over here in the land of milk and honey, the fancy crock pots, they only have a small section that has the heating element. Now, I must tell you a different thing that I've learned about the crock pot, which I wonder if maybe you could perhaps be makel on this for the Sephardim. If I say the pot goes in here, if you'll check your crock pot, you'll see and notice that it goes in somewhat. The pot that goes into this heating element goes in and is not flush against the metal. And it's bedafka that's not flush against the metal because it would be too hot and it would probably crack it. It's made bedafka that there should be a hefsik of avir, of air between. But if that's the case, it's a whole different story. It's a whole different story. If it's made bedafka to not be flush against, that's not a tsuras HATMANA. The Paiskim all say that when we talk about HATMANA, it's got to be a matmin, something which is covering it mamish, something which is enclosing it mamish. But here there's a hefsik of avir. If that's the case, it could be even Achenu Bnei Asvardim are going to be able to have chamin on Shabbos. If you were to have an old type of crock pot, maybe the one they show Rosh Zalman, and you want to be machmer Rosh Zalman, so now you understand, according to Rosh Zalman, you have to lift it out with a tuna can or something of that nature to get it that the pot would be sticking out slightly. And once the pot would be sticking out slightly, then it's not mutman from all sides. And this was, excuse me, this was the eitzah that they gave from the Goyin B'Shlem Zalman. This Rabbi Isai is Pachas Yoiser, the sugya of HATMANA b'mixes, the kishka. What I'm going to do is, because the Olam wasn't able to speak to me, what I'll do is I'm going to take off my microphone now. Next week, we'll finish the sugya of Mirta Shem. We'll go into the sugya of being ma'anig as a Shabbos. That is Hashem. And that's the Ramah. that you have to good learn Rabbi side, because the Rama says over here that a person that doesn't have hot food on Shabbos, you have to check his yichus. So we'll learn that, and maybe Bez Hashem will try to get other nekudas that we maybe weren't able to chap, and maybe a bissel chazara. So let me take off my mic, and then I'll be happy to answer whatever I'm able to answer. Bez Hashem.
There are a number of questions on the chat. If the Rav
Okay, so let's see. Maybe I'll go to the chat. 1 second.
Crockpot liners, the aluminum foil balls on the bottom.
It seems there's a lot of shilas here. Let's see.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll go one by one. I'll try to go quickly so I can get to as many as I can. What if you cover half of the cover with a towel? So that's already pretty serious, because Rav Moshe said that even though we said that even a tiny bit is enough, Rav Moshe said it has to be a tiny bit, which has like a mashmoyas to it. So this would be something that, I'll read you the words of Rav Moshe. Moshe says, Moshe, 1 second, sorry if I say, here, Moshe says, Ein shamatashal imu avamistabish b'mokim pani me'akdera she'ein shamatashal imu rak mixes. Moshe says that if you're at a place where there's no food in that area of the pot, and it's that part is open, that wouldn't bother us as much. I suppose in a lid, I'd be a little bit nervous. It would have to be something a little bit more of a mashmois. Does the towel on top of the lid make it fully HATMANA? Yes. Is the lining of the crockery with silver foil critical? So it's only critical if you want to do a chazara, or if you want to be machmir on the shail of shehiyah, which we said that the chatchila, there's an Indian to be machmir on shehiyah al kamet mitztamik v'yafalai. Would the plastic disposable crockpot liners be an issue for Shabbos use? I must admit, you mean that goes inside the pot? The stomach, that's fine. That's probably a derech bishul. That's not HATMANA. You're not being matmin it. So why again do I need to put aluminum balls on the bottom to raise it up? It's mutter anyways. So I was explaining that you would need that only for the problem of making a blech. You wouldn't be, in order to make a blech, you have to have an effective blech. The blech has to be minimizing the heat. So it's not minimizing the heat if you're just taking the silver foil and lining the inside, which is now totally blocked. It's any air passage, you're making it hotter inside. In regard to kishka, what about Rav Moshe's psak on aluminum foil? Does Rav Moshe hold putting kishka in foil as usher? So here, that's not the issue, because I'm putting the foil is not our issue. You're putting the foil clearly to make it that it won't fall apart. Our question is not on the foil. Our question is on the cholent. That's our shot. Next, let's see. I can't see the next one. 1 minute. Oh, there you go. There you go. I meant, why is it not a money? I'm not sure what that shed is. 1 second. Sorry. Why is the closed silver foil package of money went on the cholent, which is the moisif, went on the why is the closed silver foil package of money went on the cholent, which is, I don't understand the shaila. I'm sorry. How do we paskin? This, I think, was a klape. How do we paskin? So the ma'isa meikar, then we certainly paskin like the Mishnah Berurah, and therefore oichel into oichel is HATMANA, and certainly we paskin HATMANA mixes is loishme HATMANA, and therefore when you put the baby bottle in, the chatchila, you are supposed to let it stick out a little bit. In that case of the kishka on Shabbos, you are supposed to be keeping it out a little bit. If you put the kishka in the cholent on Shabbos to heat it up, like that case that I mentioned, you would have to leave it out a little bit. What happens? All these questions when you put the lid back on the cholent, but it doesn't matter because the lid is usually not flush against, and even if it's flush against, it's not on all sides, and therefore it's fine. What happens? Kedera, I think that's the Achashulchan. Does it matter if it's natural? That's interesting. If it's a natural dermakishka, then Rabbi say, just my old Hungarian blood doesn't remember. You eat the actual skin then. If you eat the actual skin, that's like the helzel that the Paiskim spoke about, which would be like the chicken that's one in the food, and then everyone agreed that wouldn't be a problem of HATMANA. And we saw that he asks if it doesn't make a difference what the temperature of the water is. It doesn't make a difference because if Kameh that's making it hot, it really wouldn't make any difference. If it wasn't broken before, that I don't understand. Okay, I think we're okay. Any other shadows, everybody say?
There was a question if the plastic on the kishka changes the status of the kishka when you wrap that in aluminum foil.
Yeah, and the plastic is edible or not edible?
No, the plastic is not edible.
So you want to know, does it make any difference? I don't see why. Are you telling me it's because of the fact that now the taste doesn't go in?
Yes, the taste wouldn't
Really?
go in. And it makes it
the taste packet doesn't go in?
Not if it's covered in plastic and aluminum foil.
So then why is he putting in the challenge? Just like minig of a same day kind of thing.
To have hot kishka.
No, but why is he submerging it? Why doesn't he just throw it in?
You'll have to ask people who do that. I don't know.
Oh, so that's what I'm saying. So in other words, if he's doing it, that's what you have to know. If he's doing it bedafka, to submerge it, he wants it even more hot, then I hear it. And maybe Nachanami. Mistama, what he's doing is just like minig of a same day. He's not even thinking. He's just throwing it in there. Doesn't care on top, not on top, whatever. Right? So you have to know, why would anybody be submerging it? If he tells you, I'm doing it for heat and it makes it hotter, then yeah. I doubt that's what's going to be the answer. I don't hear it, but it's not even coming up the yellow.
Rabbi Gottesman, your microphone is not on. Microphone is not even being recognized.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
The Rav can hear me now also. Oh, wonderful. Okay, so it was my fault. So back to this one last time. The Ramesh Neis Gimel says wrapping a silver foil is HATMANA b'Vayser Hevel. So Ramesh says on top of the kedera. He means on top of a crock pot, or does he mean inside?
Correct. He's not discussing.
He's not discussing being matman the kishkin the child at all.
No, I'll read you that lashon. Ramesh over there.
Put on Neis Gimel. Rabbi said page.
Ramesh says Haim mutar lichreich b'Shabbos davar gush mevushel tzaynim b'nir aluminum ulchamimay behefsek kedera. He's talking about something totally different over here. Governed sign in mutter lahat in ben shalayachim ben shalaystani yoytza fil takav tzinasam mahat mutter. Quotes Rishon in Zayin Vav. Ubehefsek kedera nami moiset hevel. Also about korcham b'nir aluminum nami hu HATMANA. Correct. He's discussing the actual silver foil as being something which chaps like the towel that we discussed.
Understood.
But he's not discussing the challenge.
So is this food in the pot or is it on top of the pot? What is this gimel?
It's definitely not submerged in the food.
Oh, so it's b'chlal nish negayah to us.
Correct. That was negayah what we spoke about last time, basically. And all I was Moisef last time was that today the way we use silver foil is a different world than this Rav Moshe, and we just do it always. Minigo same b'yadayim. So by us, it's just a kli.
So Rav Moshe is saying that you cannot put something on top. You can't put the Kallus in the silver foil on top of the Gedera on Shabbos because it's Moisef Hevel.
Correct. And say more. You wouldn't be able to do it even Erev Shabbos because it's over Moisef Hevel. It's also even Erev Shabbos.
Even Erev Shabbos. So according to Moshe, those who put Kallus and silver foil on top of a crockpot Erev Shabbos or on Shabbos, Toyim. And they're being
only in from the year 1970 to maybe 1994. But now today, there's no such thing. People, when they use silver foil, they're clearly not doing it for that reason. The reason a person's putting silver foil is for the 1,000 reasons, like we explained last time. So then that goes into the other kula that we spoke about, that if you have a lid and the double norm of a lid, like by the case of the thermos, the other of Moshe, I use that lumdus of Moshe, that anything that's normal, the fact that you're doing it now for heat or whatever, we don't view it as a matman agent. So Ramosha today, I can't believe wouldn't look at silver foil. I mean, you go to a regular person and tell them what's silver foil. They won't even know what you're talking about. Silver foil is the wrapping of the food.
Excellent. So Ramosha's kishkin, the challenge is the same as all the other paiskim. Last
Correct.
question. Ramosha B'Soif Yom was never asked about crockpots, never got to him. There's no Pir Shmuel, there's no oral testimony.
So oral testimony, that I'll give you. You know me, I'm sort of like a bit like I will read you the oral testimony, but it's not exactly my thing. In the 39 Malachas book, I mentioned to you first of all the Dibarta Bum, which is also brought in the Sefer Mesiris Moshe, where he brings down that the Moshe said it's not a problem because it's open lamala. He learned the Ramah Megula lamala means the lid. The Sefer Mesiris Moshe and Chelik Gimel Archaim Oiskav Memtes Sha'alti Rabbeinu. Haim yesh iser HATMANA b'shimash chashmalit achadosh shenatz l'tzarich achanas malach g'mot shalom heishiv rabbeinu bevadai shalom. D'lama yu chamuris yaisim mistam kedera. What's the problem? Hanimtza gabeesh. He says, what's the problem? This is kederach shehaya loy HATMANA. I don't understand these words. It's called derech shehiyah, not HATMANA. I don't understand these words. That's why I didn't say it over during the shir, because all of Krokpat, all of Remet was derech shehiyah. Everything they did was also, they used to wrap it, and that was derech shehiyah, and that's not a heter. So you have to know, I'm a Talmud of the Igros Moshe. I'm not a Talmud. I was not zeicher to be a Talmud of Moshe Feinstein. What?
Okay, maybe Ms. Magola. So we'll come out in Eretz Yisrael. You have Rabbi Yashiv, and for the reasons you explained, for some Zalman reasons you explained, Rabbi Yashiv or Machmer, unless you do the stuff, the tuna can. I don't know how the tuna can doesn't get burned, but okay. And then in America, the meaning became.
Do you know what the answer is? It's a very important question. You know why the tuna pan doesn't get burnt? Because there's no heating element on the bottom. If you would explain. That's why I never understood. Why didn't anybody chop this?
Okay, Alcohol is going to have to invest in a crock pot, open it up to see if American crock pots are made the same way.
All you do is you go to your wife and you say, "Oi, the crock pot is broken." She's like, "Oh, okay, gotta get a new one."
How does how does it help to be garv and kaitabit with these metal plates that they put in or whatever if there's no heating element on the bottom? Also, they sell little metal plates you can put on the bottom of your crock pot. Well, according to the Rav, it doesn't help because the heat is from the side only and not from the bottom. Is that?
No, so I definitely put it on the side also, 100%.